Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my home. This is going to be our new normal, and I'm sure you're all experiencing this at school too. So I want to start today's lesson by reminding you of what we talked about last week. We were talking about a man who had two sons, and they each were going to get an inheritance when their father died, but the younger son got into a fit. And he got really grumpy and he said, I want my inheritance now. Because if you were dead, I'd have half of your money and I could have some fun and I could be out of here. So the father, instead of reacting in anger, went ahead and said, here's your half now, and said farewell to a son who traveled to a far country. Well, remember last week, the son was having so much fun, and he was having all these friends and parties and spending money left and right, and everything was going really well, and he was partying like crazy. And then the money ran out. And to make matters worse, there started to be a food shortage. So there he was, and his friends disappeared from his life. They were no longer really close with him. So what happened was he was hungry. And he got a job feeding swine, which are pigs. So he got this job feeding swine, and he got to the point where he was so desperate for food, he was eating the pig slop too. The pigs were getting worse and worse. And all of a sudden, this light bulb, ting, went off in his head. And he remembered his father and how well his father treated the servants. And he thought, if I go back home and I beg my father's forgiveness, maybe he will hire me as a servant. And at least I will have clean clothes. I will have food. And I'll have a better job than feeding pigs. So, as you recall, as he was coming down the road, his father saw him from a distance, and his father ran to him and grabbed him and hugged him and welcomed him home and said, this is the best ever. This is the best day ever. I thought you were lost and now you're found. And that's where we ended the story, and we're going to pick it up this week there. So I have a little bit of script here, but I'm going to just tell you the story. The dad was so happy that his younger son had come home. He planned this huge party. He gave his son brand new clothes to put on. He called everybody he knew. He got all the workers together and the family and the friends, and he said, let's get a feast. We want the biggest feast you have ever seen. So the workers on the farm were making plans for all the best kind of food and the best music and giving everything they had saved for special occasions. And the neighbors were all coming over when they heard the good news that the younger son was back. Yay! So as I continue this story, what I'd like you to do is make a happy yay, wave your hand sign, not sound, when the story is going well or it's sweet. And then I want you to make a sour face when the story is going sour. So sweet, sour. So while they were partying and the music was playing and the food was abundant, the older brother, who had been out working in the fields for his father, started back home. And he heard all this music and all this food, and he said, hey, what's going on? And everybody said, your brother's back, we're having this big party. We're having this giant feast to celebrate your brother's return. Come on, join us. Well, he did not join the party. He did not eat the food. He didn't dance. He didn't listen to the awesome music. He just paced and fumed. Well, his dad figured this out, that he wasn't there, and he went looking for him. And he wanted to make sure that his older son, who would become a good friend also, was part of the party. So Dad came out and found him and invited him. He said, hey, come on in. We've got some great food. Cotton Eye Joe's coming up next, and we'll show this town how it's done. And Dad was excited. He was so excited to have his two sons back together again. And the party wasn't just for his younger son, it was for the whole family. But the older brother, no, he wasn't having any of it. His younger brother had taken half of the money and had gone off and partied and had fun, and now he was home, and the older brother was pretty mad because all this time he had been working diligently for Dad. He accused his dad of being selfish and mean and being an old fool, and he was not going to join the celebration. He felt his father should just throw his younger brother out and say, go back and feed the pigs. We don't want you here. We don't need you. Well, in the middle of the party, thrown by the kindest, forgiving dad that ever lived, the older brother crossed his arms and shook his head and said, no way, not having anything to do with this. He was not going to be a part of it. He felt he was the most neglected son on the planet, and he was never going to celebrate his good-for-nothing brother. So Dad went back to the party where the games were going on and the dessert was being served, and joined in the celebration because he thought his son was dead, and now his younger son was back and alive, and he was ready to forgive. The older brother, we don't know what happened. Jesus never told that part. We don't know if he stayed outside and threw rocks at the house and kicked the dirt and pouted forever and never forgave his brother. Or maybe, just maybe, he went up to the buffet table right by his younger brother, tapped him on the shoulder, and when his brother turned to him, he said, you got barbecue sauce on your face, just to make him laugh, like they did when they were kids, back in the old days, when everything was normal and right. Maybe he gave his brother a second chance, and maybe he chose not to miss out on the fun. So when we choose to forgive, we choose to be back in the party, back in the fun. When we choose to forgive, we make ourselves happy and the forgiven people happy. We have a chance to make it all right and new again. It's hard to do sometimes. It's very difficult. Sometimes I have taken years to forgive someone. And when I've done that, that unforgivingness weighs heavy on my heart. It doesn't feel good. It makes me angry at the person. But once the forgiving finally comes about, I can join in the fun again. I can be happy. I can hug that person again and say, I'm so glad you're in my life. Life was just not the same without you. So think this week as you go through your times, and if you're struggling because everybody's staying at home and things are getting tight, and your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, somebody's bugging you. Stop and think, do I want to be angry about this? Or do I want to have a party? Do I want to celebrate my family members? Do I want to celebrate those I love? I'm not saying that you might not have to say, I need a little space. Give me a few minutes to work this out. It may take a day. But as you go through this week and all the weeks ahead, Remember, God forgives. He's always forgiven. Jesus taught us to forgive and told us this beautiful story to show us the love and compassion that he had for us and his Father had for his sons. Go through the week and know that no matter what, God is there for you, and so is your family. Thanks for joining me. And I have another request for you. I would like you to set up an area while your parents attend the worship service where you can create a card for someone who is an older member at our church who might need a little bit of not forgiveness, but a little bit of encouragement. And make them a card that you can send when I give you an address and a name, but make a beautiful card to put a smile on their face, to put joy in their hearts, and to let them know, even though they can't see your sweet face in church, as you come down the aisle for the Word of God for all ages, that you're still thinking of them. They are not forgotten, and they will write back. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful